In today's video, I'm going to be showing you 4 unique features you can add to your deserts or arid environments to turn up the heat on your maps. My name is Matt from MapShark. Feel free to grab your pen. Let's get inking. Alright, we're going to be starting this one off with mesas. Here I'm grabbing my 0.5 micron pen and I'm just drawing a gentle slope up and to the right, followed by a sharp incline representing the cliff side of the mesa. Then I head over to the right to get the top side. I'm doing like a partial side perspective. You can still see the top of the mesa, and then we're just going back down on the right side cliff side and gentle slope back down. Alright, and then we're going to be drawing the ground level. I'm just making a kind of squiggly line up and down and joining those two cliff sides together. Next up, still with that 0.5 pen, I'm just making these small indentations, and these are going to be the actual cracks that form shadows along the sides of the mesa. Now I'm just going to add these little layers of dirt and sediment along the base of the mesa. Still using that 0.5, but now we're going to be switching back over to a 0.05. Basically just grabbing your thinnest pen to do some detailing. So I'm going back over these vertical lines to give them a little bit more definition, adding a couple scratches to the top, give it a little bit of texture, and then back down to the base. And again, kind of just filling in those lines that we created earlier. Here I'm barely just touching the paper, making these horizontal lines to represent the layers of sediment in the rock. And that's it. Next up, we're just going to be doing some shading. I'm grabbing my second lightest color. I like this one for any of the dark shading. And I'm just going to go back over those vertical lines to pick out some of these shadows that are getting cast on itself. Now here you can kind of play with the thickness and the shape. Take a look at some of these images. They can be really random on how they form and which kind of length of shadows they cast. Now here I'm just hitting up the left side because I'm assuming that my light is coming from the top right. And just going over it again to darken up these shadows. Now I'm just pulling out my lightest color and I'm just going to give it a little bit of texture and trying to represent these different layers of sediment. And once again here being picky and going over it again, trying to darken up the shadows a little bit more so they stand out from those layers. And there you have it, a simple mesa. I'll be going back over the ground layer a little bit to give it a little bit more texture. You'll see that in the next section. Feel free to skip the next minute or so. I'm just going to be redrawing these with a couple of variations just to show you a couple new ways to change it around and make your own. And here I'm going to go back with my lightest shading like I said earlier and just do some texture across the ground and some of the mesas. Alright, feature number 2, which pairs very nicely with the first one. These are going to be arches. Now to make these arches, I'm making some very rough, wavy lines up and down to get this upside down U look. Still using the 0.5, I'm just adding some details, some shapes to the rocks. Trying to pick out some of those jagged edges as well as the smoother, rounder ones. Just trying to make the whole shape look interesting. And here I pull out the smallest pen, 0.05, and going in further, adding a little bit more detail to each of the lines. Now I'm back with my second darkest shade, putting in some shadows to the archway, assuming that my light's coming from the top right. I'm going to be casting a shadow on the inner side of the archway, along the bottom, and some of the left side. Throughout this process, I'm using these gray shaded pens. You can use whatever you want. You can do a solid black shading or hatching, whatever you prefer your style of shading. Do what you like. Here I'm going to go back over it just like I did the Mesa with the ground layer, giving it a little bit of extra definition with my 0.5, adding in some details like some cactus. And again with my 0.05, just stippling, putting a bunch of little dots, give the ground a little bit more of a sandy texture, adding in some rocks, simple enough, and last but not least, some shading to those details. And there you have it. That's going to be feature number 2, what you can add to your desert or arid environment. And in this next drawing, I'm just going to show you how to combine those two elements to make your own unique features. And here we are at feature number 3. This is going to be an oasis, more for your obviously desert environments rather than arid. You don't see oases that often, I don't think, in arid environments. Anyways, what we're drawing is basically just a lake. I'm adding in some details with the 0.05, just some little squiggles on the edges of the lake representing ripples. Going around adding some reeds, bushes, grass, etc. Throw in some rocks like we did with the mesas. Now for this I'm going to be showing you 2 little types of palm trees. Here I'm just making some little circles, almost square-like thing, leaning off to one side. And then I'm just going to be making a couple of main branches with very small leaves hanging off the side of each. Maybe overdoing it a bit. Just stop. Not stopping. Alright, well, that's okay. Adding in the shading and a little bit of texture. I'm just gonna put this right here. Don't worry about it. Just a little rocket. Alright, moving on to tree number 2. Same thing for the bottom part and then the top leaves. I want to make them more cartoony. More of a sharp shape. No definition to the actual like leaves themselves. And just a black solid fill. For this one, just to get the point across, I always add in some sand dunes right next to it. These ones are super simple. I'm not going to actually add it as like one of the 4 unique things because I don't think it's unique. It's just a sand dune. It's just what I do is just a hill and a squiggle down the center. There's a lot of other tutorials out there if you want to go check those out that show you how to actually make them step by step. Just adding a couple last details here. I actually like to darken up the center of the water with a shading pen. You could use hatching again, whatever you like. Here I am just adding some sand texture again with those little dots. Nice little dots, happy little dots all over the place. And last but not least, back again with my lightest color shading, just texturing up the ground. And that's feature number 3, the Oasis, done. Alright, last but not least, feature number 4 is going to be canyons. Now with this one, I'm using my 0.5, which is making these gentle, kind of wavy lines heading downwards kind of randomly. I'm cutting off with these horizontal lines just to show the ridge line. These are going to be the edges of the cliff, and then here I am going back and kind of pulling out these like crevices, just adding a little bit of texture to the canyon ridge line itself. Now I'm going back again, kind of making these marks, more textures along each of the sides of the cliff. Now here I actually pull out my 0.2 and I'm going down the cliff side and pulling out these ridges to give it that definition. You can make as many of these as you want. I keep it just to a couple so it doesn't mess with my shading later on. And again, same thing on the other side. Simple, fairly vertical little lines. I'm picking out the ones that you're actually going to be able to see, not the ones facing away from us. And then here back to my 0.5, and I'm making the actual river that is cutting through this canyon. You can use whatever river style you like to draw here. I'm just doing 2 lines, and then later on I'm going to go back to shading it. Now coming back 0.05, adding a little bit more detail in here, a little couple of clumps of bushes. I'm adding a cactus here just to give it that desert arid vibe. Now going back, placing dots all over the place like usual, giving it that little bit of a sand rough texture. First on the left side, and then I'll be jumping over to the right side doing the same thing. Then again, same thing down in the actual base of the canyon itself. Now I'm busting out my second darkest shade again, the one that I always use for shading. Again, you can use hatching if you would like, whatever preference you have to shading these. I'm assuming again that my light source is coming from the top right, and I'm just going to be shading the right side of this cliff since the sunlight will be hitting the left side. And just shading up the little bit of details that I put in under each one of these tufts of grass and the cactus. And here I go, same marker, just shading in the river. Again, sometimes I do this solid black. You can do hatching, whatever you do for rivers, you do you. And ladies and gentlemen, that is our 4th and final feature to spice up our arid and desert environments. Let me know if you enjoyed this video by leaving a comment and dropping a like. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell if you want to see more content like this from me in the future. For daily map making content, be sure to follow my socials linked in the description below. And if you're curious of what kind of pens I use, I have them also linked down below. And until next time, happy mapping, my friends. Hey, if you remember if you